Good Wednesday morning of the 15th week. This is an interesting text of the gospel. Can I read it to you, okay? I'll show you what he's struggling with. On that day, Jesus went out of the house and sat down by the sea. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat down. The whole crowd stood along the shore. And he spoke to them at length in parables, saying, this is a famous parable. A sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some of the seed fell on the path, and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky ground where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil was not deep. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. Some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it. But some seed fell on rich soil and produced fruit 100 or 60 or 30-fold. See, whoever has ears ought to hear. See, I think what they were struggling with in the early church in Matthew's time and to this day is something, and that is why the faith was lost by so many people, or it was strangled. That is, it never reached a robust depth. I don't know that word for it. It didn't lead to the flourishing to 60-fold, 100-fold, or 30-fold, but withered on the vine or whatever. And I was thinking, it says, and he spoke and looked at, he said, some birds came and ate it up. I guess that would refer to some, I don't know, worldly attractions or something. Or it could be ate it up, it could be foreign influences. I forgot, they do interpret this thing. Somewhere along the line it is. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know. But probably the more birds came and ate it up, those would be enemies. Those would have been the enemies. See? The birds are snatching it up, stealing it, you see. But I think the one that to me is most interesting, okay? He said, some fell on rocky ground where it had little soil. It sprang up at once because the soil's not deep. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and it withered for lack of roots. You know, I want to think of my generation there, because I think they speak about the pious 50s, okay? And something really failed. And I wonder if this isn't the analogy that the seed really never penetrated deeply, radically. At the very radice means a root. Oh, the radix, it's a root. It didn't go deep into the soil. The soil, the human heart, the human consciousness, the value systems, the values that we have. We were pious, we practiced the faith, but we practiced it, but did we internalize it? And how deeply did we internalize it? Because when the 60s came, and later after that, there was so much defection, so many left the faith, so many people who were really pious during the 50s, and I'm not knocking it. They were very practicing. People went to Mass every day. And 15 years later, they were no longer believers. I'd make it rougher. In the monastery, it was you always had a certain degree of fellows who in their formation, in their training, okay? We always had attrition. So we started with 25 guys in my class, and they thought that maybe 10 of us would get ordained. Because it's just a natural attrition, okay? It's just natural, no loss of anything. It isn't their vocation, okay? But it was different this time. Whole classes got wiped out during the 60s. It was happening during and right after the council. And what happened, I think their pieties were shattered. And there wasn't the depth. I remember, whatever this is worth, I'll tell you why. I'll give you this and I'll tell you why I said it. Because I'm going to say this, so many guys, when they left the faith as well. And they were angry at the church. They were angry at the faith. They were bitter. That's the truth. It was hard in those days to remain faithful to one's vocation in the church, vocation in the order, because we looked foolish in the eyes of the guys who left. It wasn't just they left because, well, I think I would call it a married state. They left, they rejected it. And they would tend to be very bright guys. And I think I remember feeling, in some senses, the guys that stuck it out, you think, well, we must be the dopes. These are the smart guys. I mean that sincerely. There was one point back when I was stationed in New York and Jamaica, okay? It had to be around 64 or 65. So the council was still in session, but it was really, really rough, okay? And I have to say, see, Humpty Dumpty came off the wall. Once you start dancing around with pieties and liturgy and the cultic narrative, you're opening Pandora's box. You're risking it, especially when you do it so rapidly as what happened at the council. Humpty Dumpty comes off the wall, and all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put it back together. It was bad. And I remember the older priests and our teachers were having a struggle with it. They couldn't, the world got shaken, you see. And that was a tough time. It was not a time of moral violence or moral difficulties. It was theological and creedal. Faith. Do you believe? The guys that were leaving, not all, but many of the guys who leave, especially those who were most radical, they rejected the faith. That's really true. And I remember when I saw it at that time, because it was poignant for me. I asked myself one question. Sometimes in around 1964, 65, was my second year in Jamaica. And we were just ready to take our final vows, okay? And I remember thinking, do I believe in Christ? Simple as that. Do I believe in Christ? And I made the choice to believe. I choose to believe. That's the truth. It's not do you believe in the Pope? Do you believe in do I believe in Christ? See? That's the truth. And I think in so many cases, in so many ways, the faith was cultural, but it wasn't deep. I think I just said that right. It was more cultural, and the priesthood was fashionable. An atheistic friend of mine said that Christianity, well, Catholicism is fashionable. It had become fashionable. The priesthood was fashionable. It wasn't fashionable anymore, and it absolutely is unfashionable now. You really got to have faith in the priesthood in terms of the church or ministry of the church today, because the priesthood is not a glorious vocation at all. At all. You've got to really be a believer now. And that's the best thing that could have happened. Before it was a racket. It's no racket anymore, believe me. See? Yeah. And he said some fell among thorns, and the thorns choked it. That could be moral, the morality of the time. It choked the life of the faith out of it. But then he said some landed on good ground. See, it went deep, and it produced fruit. That's the truth. I can see that today, when you see believers today, they are committed believers. I can tell you that in class, because I teach philosophy of religion, and one of the things I ask the kids, at a certain point I ask, because I'm doing the proofs of the existence of God, this and that, I go way beyond the argument. So I see their paper, I ask them to write an assignment, and the first assignment is, does God exist? You'd be surprised the number of kids who say he doesn't. It's about a 10-page paper. There are reasons for it. And many will say, I was baptized a Catholic or a Christian, but I am no longer a believer. Others will say, I was raised in an atheistic home, but I became a convert. Or I have received all the sacraments and I am deeply committed to the faith. And they may put it in a certain way, but you get the point. You're either in or you're out, but what you're not is floating along. And I think this is the healthy moment in the life of the church. Now it's put up or shut up. All the way from the Pope down and the bottom up. Today you have to make a commitment. Either to believe or not believe. What you can't do is waltz around. See? Because the culture we're in now is so antithetical. It's attacking the faith. Hence, you can't just waltz along. You got to choose you're in the fight or you're not. See, are you willing to believe no matter what the cost, or are you going to reject it? But what you're not going to do is float. That's a good thing. It's exactly what was going on in Matthew's time for those Jewish Christians. It was put up or shut up. The cost was astronomical. We're back to that now. That period created Western Christianity, created Christianity. This period will recreate Christianity because people are going to choose.